Interesting. So essentially, what we're doing now, and we see a lot of projects going out there that actually covers the refactoring that you're gonna have to do when you're moving from a Vue 2 app to a Vue 3 app. So I'm gonna take this opportunity. There's an app I developed. I wouldn't say an app I developed. It's a website that I created for the kids a few years ago that my wife and I would actually use to track their chores and give them points or dollars towards the chores that they are doing over the years. So I was talking about it over the holiday season, and a friend of mine was saying, "Hey, that sounds like a good idea, something that they would probably want to use." So I'm gonna go refactor it right now, put it on Vue. Originally, it was developed. I did it with Vue 3, running a Vuex store, and hosted it on Firebase. So I'm going to take the opportunity right now to just refactor it and put it on Vue 3, using Vuetify as well, and at the same time spinning over to Pinia, because Pinia is now being positioned as the official store for Vue.js. And Vuex still works. I still like Vuex, but it was just a part of me just trying to expand on the number of state management frameworks that we were actually using. So I and having switched over to Pinia for at least two other projects, I quite enjoy using it that way. So we're just gonna look at going through this project doing it. So what we're going through now is not just that magical place of just getting there, but just going through. The application does leverage a lot of the Firebase components. So we are actually using Firebase as our backend and also as our hosting solution. And what is happening now, I'm just going through and testing through some of the colors on the app itself. So I call it Chore Bank. There's no copyright to it. Knock yourself out. Do what you need to do. It's just something I've developed for my family, and we've been using it. So here I am with the login screen, in Vue, especially when you use Vue.js. Part of the setup is that there is this plugin script that you run, which you go through and configure for the different color schemes that you'll be using. I often only use my primary and secondary. So on screen here, I've just created some sheets from Vuetify, the V sheets, and I'm actually trying to figure out what's the default accent color here. So I'm not seeing any. We are using Vite as the package manager. Is it Vite the package manager? Yeah, Vite is actually using the hot module load. So I think we were previously using. What were we previously using? I'll tell you in a minute. Probably camera shy at this point in time. So Vite is what I've actually been using as well. So I'm trying to find the accent color. I cannot. There's nothing here. So often, as we see on when we do these videos, you'll see people, jumping around and just typing things. I don't have that capacity to remember everything that's happening because this is my day job. I don't do it every day. I'm officially, if you look at my certification, I went to university, software engineering background, whatever. But what I'm doing now is really just a hobby. It keeps the mind active. It's like reading for me. It's like listening to music for me. I'll just develop these stuff and play around with different types of technology. And it also supports me in my day job, which is really more of an advisory role now for cloud infrastructure, actually. So getting started with Vue, on the Vuetify page here. And what I'm actually just looking for, lovely page. I love how Vuetify actually creates their documentation. It's so easy to consume, and the examples that they're giving you, you can actually just lift them and start building out something. Now, I think I can code. I'll consider myself a decent coder, but when it comes down to design, that's part of the reason why I typically shied away from anything that had to do with web development, because I didn't have the capacity to understand the CSS, whether it's Sass or regular CSS, to make something pop and look really beautiful. So all of these tools that are being developed now, like the Wix and the WordPress templates that are coming out, are magical because they actually give you the capability to make something really beautiful. And then for me, I was more focused on creating, management information system type websites. So it's not for a marketing. It's not for retail sales. It was more for record keeping, back office kind of stuff. But man, when I found Vuetify, woo! I I I am finding that I am designing things now like crazy out of the box. But less of the gamble, but more on just following with me through the journey of what I'm about to do, which is really just trying to set up my color settings for the project. So yeah, I know I mentioned it was good. I am looking for sheets, text box, grids, data selection, window, alerts, skeleton, avatars, and just do it the right way. Go back here, do a search, and go for sheets. All right, here we are. Sheets, sheets, sheets. There is a border attribute. I knew there was one. So let me do border. And this is just to confirm that something is there. So something is there. All right, voila, found it. I'm gonna repeat it on a lot of these guys, just so that there's an outline of the border that's there. And with the hot module reload, you're seeing it, that's happening in real time right here. So no accent color. It's not all that jazz. But I'm gonna go off screen here and check on my original project, just to see what's happening in the space as it relates to my color scheme that I was actually using. So plugins, Vuetify. Interesting enough, no color scheme. I was not loading any options, so it was likely just using the default color scheme in Vuetify. So Vuetify, let's go color scheme or theme rather. All right. I want to use a theme API, but let's see, whatever. Read only, no. Sheets, okay, I got you. And we're just gonna explore a bit. So under my plugin section, there is an attribute on the colors for primary, secondary. So we're just gonna do accent color, and I'm gonna pull out the colors dot red dot let's just see if this actually exists, right? Save, hot module reload happen, and there we are. So here I'm actually just loading in now the different colors that we want to have on the component. If I go back to my login view, which is what I'm actually looking at, let's get rid of this so we can see some the coding. And I'm gonna actually, yeah, I didn't ask you if you were actually seeing the text, and hopefully you are. We're gonna stick it with that size of coding. So a lot of what's happening here, V to sheet, blah blah blah. We've covered that. And I want to try one more thing. There's some other colors within Vuetify, like success. And you're asking me, this is the boring part. This is the setup part about making your project out there. And where am I? And success, what's the other one? Arrow. So these are this is the color palette that I'm working with right now. And then the other one is info. So there are colors coded in. So this is what's there right now that I'm actually playing with. So that's my color palette that I can actually see where all the colors looking like. I think I may want to change this, but for now we're gonna let it play out. I just needed to see what the colors were like for what's happening. So again, the project is lifting my Vue2 app, migrating it over to Vue3, converting from Vuetify 2 to Vuetify 3, changing my state management framework from Vuex to Pinia, and still retaining my Firebase backend. And subsequent to me creating this website, actually, Firebase did move over into V9, where they did a lot of tree shaking and splitting out some of the components. So it's not that heavy anymore. But most of my newer projects have already refactored them. And one of the common things I tend to always do with my projects is whenever I find a flow that works, I maintain that flow over into another project and just keep creating on it incrementally. So you'll find I have a lib folder, and in that lib folder, I have a few things that I've already created that works perfectly fine for every other project. For example, my database service goes in there. It pulls in some of the things that I'm actually using, whether it's scripted.js, or some hashes that I use in some of my projects that I keep in. So I should validate whether or not I still need this and pull it out. But from a Firebase perspective, it's the V9 format. So I'm creating a config file. I'm pulling that config file in with all the values that I need. And these are values based on Firebase that can be out there. Users can know because you need an SSL certificate anyway for you to be able to read this on the website. So the users won't ever be able to see this kind of information, I hope. So, and these are the different functions that we're pulling out of the Firestore, things that we used. And I've just set up a singleton database service to do a number of things that's happening. This new part here that I've added recently was another project that I was working on that was also SaaS based, that I created all of my collections under a master collection that was at the org level. So I've just added this in my database service going forward. So if I am creating a SaaS solution, the same database service can be leveraged by just setting some parameters, and that will go in as well. Nothing else crazy to see here. Just a lot of stuff that we've done throughout time to make stuff work for me. Lots of comments there. Still a single, shop developer, not anything fancy. So my commenting is not on point there. All right, so back to where we are. So typically with any Vue app, there's an entry point. That entry point being the main.js. We come in from that. If you look in my setup, let me collapse everything. Our setup actually comes in here. So there's a index.html file. This is part of what Vue runs. Normally with Webpack it was a little bit different, but with Vue this is how it's done. So I'm coming in, putting in a title here. Normally this is the same index.html file I use all the time, because voila, I just found it. Can you believe that? I've been trying to figure out where my hook happens, and this is where the hook happens, and I'm like, wow. So this is when you come into your index.html file, and I expand on why I was trying to figure out where the hook happens. And typically your Vue.js app is, when you load it, it looks for this identifier and then uses this as the launching point for your application. So if I go to the main.js, what you'll find is web mount looks for the app, and that pulls it in. Because I'm using Firebase again, I rely a lot on Firebase authentication. So I'm using Google sign in and anything that Google allows us to do, whether it's passwordless sign in with email links. And so I have an authentication component that actually just gives us the capability to run the unauth. So unauth here is pulling out from the Firebase auth itself. And then I'm ensuring that as the auth state changes for the user, we're setting up the app as required. And then doing a bunch of stuff here. So what I've commented out here is a separate section that I was using in another project that now I'm just bringing it over. So chances are, as I refactor going forward, you'll find that some of these things will come in and be uncommented. So for now, this is where we're at. Home. My router is actually set up right now with just a few routes. There's a home route. There's a home route, login route, about route, and of course there's a page not found route that I've also set up here. and here's the create router. Now, so I take the routes, load them in, make sure I have the create web history based on the URL, and then there is a route guard. And in my route guard, I'm checking whether or not the route is public. And if it's public, I allow it to go through. If it's not public, then I force it to go through a login. So all of this is actually just reused code from another project, because this is no standard for me in terms of the route guards that's actually being used. All right, so let's dive in. So based on my app, this is what the mode looks like. I have a login page that I need to work. So what I'm gonna do for now is gonna take this and I'm gonna lift it and just park it somewhere nice for now. And if I do a save, hot module reload, we are good to go. Now, what's a login form? So typically what you want with a login form is just really just a box in the center of the screen. So because I'm refactoring, I don't need to do a lot of the code all over again from scratch. So you'll see my screen flicker on and off. I have a few screens here that I'm actually moving stuff from. So my aim is to pull in as much as I can from my current app. It worked before, so why change what works, right? So I had a login form, and I'm gonna copy over as much as I can from the login form. Actually, this should be a good way for you to see what happens in the refactoring. So, okay, I'm gonna save this. All right, immediately stuff start breaking. My console output is actually crying like crazy. So we're gonna fix this step by step. Now the other thing we're gonna fix this step by step and go through. So my cards, all of this actually still works. Click.native. We're gonna have to look at whether or not, see, it's been deprecated. So we have to make sure we find what is the new solution for this. You'll also see here that I have a Google button. So I've followed the material design, made a component that's a Google button. So that's probably going to be part of what's being screamed here. And right out of the box, the first thing that's being screamed about is Vuex, right? No Vuex there. So we're going to remove Vuex from this. Does this file exist? Nope, I didn't load Vuex into this module. So we can get rid of that. I'm not using form validation anymore. My validation process has changed. So let's just go about setting this up. So this is now script setup. Because it's script setup, a lot of these components I don't have yet. So, well, I do have them. So let's just set that up. So that's under my components. At this point, I do not have a component subfolder. So let's make sure we create a component subfolder here. So that's under source. And one of the first things I need to copy over from my existing project as I look away for that project is my Google folder. So I bring over Google, everything I need for Google. For example, my button is there, which means that this part of the code will actually still work for me. All right, first thing is first, setup, export default, thing of the past. We don't need that anymore. So you're gonna watch for the next couple of minutes or however long it takes for me to refactor this and make sure a login screen comes up here. So name is no longer required. Mixins, in case of mixins, I think I've actually, in Vue3, mixins they weren't very efficient way of doing reusable code. So what they replaced that with now is composables. So there is a composable that I'm using now for form validation that I'll get to next. The components in Vue3, I don't need to, especially in the setup script, I don't need to explicitly do a component section anymore. The fact that I've declared them here, they're all now available to the template as components that can be actually used. So I'll drop this. The next interesting thing that comes out with the setup script is that everything that you had before in the data function under under the old Vue2 format, you've now pulled all of these out as constants. No, it's not. I've quite a few people I've heard complain about the fact that no, you have so many constants in it. Before I started doing it, I was kind of of that view before, but as I got used to doing it this way, it started to feel natural. So the other nice thing in Vue is the ref. So I want to go import from Vue. Let's call it out ref. So it's good when you have the Vue3 snippets extension in VS Code. Actually saves a lot of time. And if you are watching through here, you will see that I still have a lot of errors, right? So if I save that, now it's complaining about something else. So good, we're moving on. And now I'm gonna get an alert constant. So normally I have a object for alert, and I keep it this way so that I can actually push info to my snap, my app snack bar, so to speak. So that's one. And I have another component, supplied credentials, which is actually used in my Firebase authentication process. And I've done that. So loading is now complaining, hey, you're not using me, but I'm declared but not being used. Yeah, I know. Well, we're going to come to you shortly. Now, this is part of what I've been finding in while I'm doing my refactoring. Because I was just used to leveraging things from one area to the next, one of the things I found that was quite interesting was the fact that there were some variables that were just sitting around that weren't being used. But now that I've called them out with the constant, with IntelliSense and all of that going on in VS Code, I can explicitly know that something isn't necessarily required anymore. So in my refactoring, one of the first things I realized was that my code script size was actually being shrunk. So the lines of code that I had there was being reduced significantly. And that was something that I found rather interesting. Whether or not that's going to be the case with this particular file that we're doing, I don't know yet. So this is just me doing the login view and making sure that works. So export default, I said we don't use mixins anymore, and that was my validation. We've now completely taken out all of the data limits. So I can drop that. And yes, it looks messy, but this is the method that I use, right? So these are my different functions. Async wait next. All right, so what do I want to do? All right, compute it. Compute is the next thing. With Vue3, I've switched from computed to null because they've called out the lifecycle hooks a little bit differently. So one of the hooks that I normally like to use that I've used to load things just after the DOM finish loading is the unmounted. So for the unmounted, you pass to it a callback, and in that callback is where anything that you were doing in your, why did I do that? I didn't have a created here. Oh Lord. So let's get rid of that. Get rid of this too. Keep it on. Computed though is one of those. Computed, and that's why I did it. So now I have a constant called app logo, and it is now a computed and again, even this computed takes on takes on a value. So for this, I'm just gonna do this. Let's see if that works. See, it's complaining about my require. Require is not defined, blah 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 blah. There's another way we do imports in the and I'm gonna actually see if I can find that app. One sec. referencing. Now remember, this video is not me, the expert. It's me going through, seeing what I've actually done in previous codes before. So my computed, just validating. Yes, it's computed. I do pass a hook to it, where there is a place for me to grab things like logos. Just make sure. What we've been doing is just importing them directly in, which is another interesting thing. So for example, default festival logo, we are gonna do the default logo as another import. So it's import. You know what? Let's keep this cap. Import application logo from. And I don't believe I created an asset. Well, so I'm gonna do that right now. Nope, that's not where I want it. I want it here. And I normally just have, because we're refactoring the old, let me just get what that logo was. So closing this, it was in the image, there was a logo. Let's move that over. PNG, right? Now I could have done this the exact same way I've done my other projects by putting everything over, but I found that when I did that for some of the other projects that I've refactored, I also brought over a lot of things that wasn't required. So this is my opportunity to try and clean up the project a bit, and I just keep the Vue and Vue3 logo for now. Eventually, I'll replace this with my own logo for the app. So there is a subfolder here as well. We create that, and let's move that there. Yes, I'm moving it. I no longer need to see you. And here I go again. So right out of the box, I've imported my asset. When you're going through, remember with Vue, the @sign, this is actually configured so that the compiler knows what @ means, and this really just means your source folder. So you set it up and tell it where to get it. And I think if I go down here and I go to my Vite config, this is where you've actually set it up, right? Export default, define config, wherever your plugins are for Vue, and then we resolve the alias. I put this alias in, and I've told it this is where the path is for that, right? So it will actually pick this up and go in there. So enough of that. Let's close that. Application log. According to how I've actually done this before, when I'm doing this sort of import, what I need to now do is adapt up. I asset, acquire that. It's my login. That's what it was saying I should do. This is what I now do in the new form. I pull the logo in the computed, I just return it. Is that it? Okay. So I will return my app logo as application logo. And that should go away. What is this telling me? It's declared but never used. Really now? That's another interesting thing. Ain't that funny? I've never used the app logo anywhere in this as well. Da 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 da. Let's do this. We are taking you out. And we're gonna say app logo. Oh, why aren't you seeing me? There's something not complete here about my, yep, This isn't complete. So if I do that, no, buddy, I don't need the end one. I don't need both of them. All right. So let's take out this native. I want to keep this native in because I don't remember why it's there. And I think it's one way of making sure the click stays here. Cannot contain ES module exports. That's fine. We're going through tap, which is this export it's actually referencing. So it's now complaining that I don't want that to be there. And we're fine with that. So we've already converted this, the app logo. Get application state. Oh, this is crazy. For now, let's do this. We're just gonna pull it out because we haven't done the Pinya setup yet in this project. We're just gonna hard code this for now, right? The application name. So return Shorebank. Then I'm gonna put a to do here. So to just pull it from the Pinya global store. So this is just a reminder to me as we go forward, this is what I want you to do. So I no longer need this guy. And show message. Why does that do that? Yeah, that's something for my snack bar, which is another computed. So let's use the same names. Ooh, this computed is working. Open brackets. And again, we're doing this. We're not changing anything. So the alert message that we're talking about here goes up here. All right, interesting. This is one of the other things that I have to now explain. So here's my alert. It's declared right here in the script setup, right in the top module. Constant alert. Vue3, this concept here, this alert message, forget that. It's actually now alert. Wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it. Those of you who saw it earlier, I actually did not make this subject reactive, so now making it reactive. And the fact that I've now wrapped it in the ref, I know whenever I'm referencing it anywhere else, I have to go alert dot see IntelliSense value, right, dot message. And that's how the ref works for the reactive variables. That's the big difference that's there. Since I'm here, let me make sure I wrap this one also in the ref. So it's going. There's a lot happening here. I promise you, when I get to the other form, it will be a lot smoother. It's just me going through and refreshing my muscles in this one. So the show message is there. Email errors. So these are the validation errors that I've actually put in to support the form. I'm gonna leave that there for now, and then move on to the methods. So let's just do this and go. I mean, just so that when I'm going back, I'll actually see what they are. So normally what I do, so here's another Vuex thing. This is me exposing or pulling out rather from the Vuex store some of the actions that were on the store users. So this is done differently in Pinya, and I'm going to show you in a few minutes how that is done. But I want to pull out the other methods that were just probably sitting there. Why don't we do this one? My handle login errors. And yeah, a lot of it just boils down to you doing that. Yeah, I lost it in translation. In transit, rather. So here's this constant. Gonna start using my arrow functions here. I'm gonna take my arrow. I'm gonna push it in here. We get rid of this semicolon there. ESLint is working behind the scenes. You know, it's formatting everything as nice with Prettier as well. Formatting everything as nicely as I have. This alert was referencing this alert. So as you've seen above, because I've wrapped it in a reference, it goes here. And again, handle login error is popping up as you're not even using this, buddy, which we're gonna get back to at some point in time. Methods. Sign in with Google. Call it out. Async. So in this case, I go constant name equal, put the async in front of the wrapper, and then use the arrow. Again, loading was a ref variable, so I now have to go loading.value, maintain the reactivity. This .next, I no longer need this, if I'm being honest, because all of these are going to be exposed. .value, I'm good. It's a lot of things to do just to see this thing actually works. So even my Google sign in that I'm going to pull in later on, that should pop up and work. So still a lot of errors coming over here. So we're not quite out of the woods yet. But I figured it was good example to show you a lot of the painstaking stuff that happens behind the scenes as you're doing this refactoring. And I'm sure a lot of you probably have different ways of doing this, but this is the method that I found that just works for me. I'm doing this on an early Saturday morning, you know, just as I get ready to do other things, and this is just my way of going through and getting things done. So this is my next, and this is me actually sending you the user off to the next screen after the login works, if the login works. Now here is one of the other nice things that happens in Vue. I now have what we call composables. So here you see me using rota, replace rota. What I now have in Vue3, access to in Vue3, is the composable for the rota. And I actually pull those out of the Vue rota. So let me do this here. Import. I want to go from Vue rota. Leave that in. And there are two things I need. Right now, I think I'm only going to pull one out, which is just a rota. I could do use route, which would give me access to the route. So anything on the route, which is, you know, the params, the query string, whatever. But no, I just only want the use rota composable from that. So I pulled that out. And then right here in my next, I'm going to drop this. No, actually, before I get there, I now have to create call rota and call a constructor on this. So this function gives me access to my rota. My rota is sitting there not being used, but I'm going to use it right now. And that's that. That next function should just work as it was working before. The last method I have to pull out is sign in with email. I'm gonna put that here. Sign in with email. Another constant. Take the async from here. Put the async this side. And then do what I have to do. Alright, so the functions are out. The validation rules is what I'm left with to deal with. There's no more methods. I don't need this. So here's what I'm going to do to try and make my life a lot easier. I'm going to kill everything else that follows. Close it. Hot reload. Here it is. It's calling out a lot of things that I needed. So my lib for validators don't. So how do we do validation in Vue3? And that's what I'm about to show you. So for the validation, do I have a validation in this form? I do. Alert message, blah, 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 blah. Let me find one of my components here. All right. So we're going to keep our validation component. So for example, required. Now, when I do that when I do this, it's actually now at validators, not the lib, but now the validators. This is what I have. Form validation, I'm no longer using a mixin. I've actually converted these to composables, which is the new way of trying to accomplish reusable code. So if I collapse here, my source, I don't have a folder for my composables. So I'm just going to go do that right now. I'm going to create myself a new subfolder called composables. Done. And the magic of me being able to do this and show you what it looks like, I'm just going to bring over my already done use form on validation. So if I go in, let me show you what's happening here. So I'm using use Vue3 from the Vue3 core. Again, Vue3 is a validation library that we use, couple that with Vue, and actually allows you to do some really cool things in terms of validating form fields. And what I'm doing here is just creating a composable, and then exposing all of the functions in that composable that I want to use. I'm passing into this composable the rules that I want to validate and the document against which I'm validating them. What I did was to extract the validation, take the validation away from the form per se, and validate the document in itself. And depending on where that particular property of the document is being validated, this will return the actual error to that component, and then it gets displayed. Roundabout way of doing it. I'll probably do something else at a later date just to show you how this works in particular. All right, so back here. So now I still get my required. This is all doing what it does best, telling me that it's not happening. And it's also telling me, hey, I don't have a mixin anymore. And that's because I don't need you anymore. Because in the new world, what I'm going to be doing is import. And from that import, it's, I'm going to say, actually, if I do this, it should come in a little bit better. So from my at composables / use form. What was the name of it again? Use form validation. Yep. That's what I did. Just making sure. Yep. And fully qualify the name with the JS, even though it's worked on occasions for me. And then when I after that, yep, same name. All right, so now I've pulled it in, and the question is, okay, so what happens at this point in time? So I have the use form validation, and this is how I've actually set it up. So the key thing that you now have to do is now I have to go out and I have to define a rules component, right? Which is crazy. So right before I start anything, I normally do a constant validation rules just to make my variable names as friendly as possible. And my validation rules is also a computed arrow function. Yeah. And all it does is it returns it returns an object that is structured based on the actual fields that I want to validate. So for example, here you're seeing in our validation, there's the email errors, password errors, And these are really the two things that we're focusing on. In the form, the object itself, credentials, this is what we're validating, supplied credentials, email, and they're called passwords. So we're going to replicate that. So we have email, and email will take an object. We also have password, and password will also take an object. Right? Actually, I never did look at whether or not I did that, but let's get to that. In my mind, I'm trying to figure out, long before I started using the Google authentication product, I would have to take the password and in good practice, make sure that whatever that password is, when that user clicks the submit button, it gets hashed with a salt so that when it hits my server, no matter what, I shouldn't be able to figure out what the password is. And in transit, if someone intercepts it, I shouldn't also be able to see in plain text what the password is. So in essence, when I get that, I get a hashed value. When it hits my server, it also gets hashed and added with a salt. So unless you truly know the user's password, and are able to replicate that hash, you shouldn't be able to get in. So it's I don't even remember how I've done it, but I had to do a lot of reading about password, handling password out of the client side and sending it over to the browser as well. All right, so back to my validation rules. So in my validation rule, there are two things I wanted to do. The password should never be empty. The email rather should never be empty, and it should be in the format of email, right? Otherwise, I'm going to say it's dirty. So how do I do that in the new world using the composable? So first thing, it is required. And another nice thing that came is that I can validate and also tell what my error messages are going to be. So right here where I called out my required, from Vue3, I can actually call out something that I refer to as helpers. And with my helpers, normally what we would just do is just email required and then that would be a thing. But when I go with helpers, I now have to do helpers dot with message, and then I'm gonna say what message I want. Email is required, and what validation should happen. So it's still doing the required, and I'm passing back the required here. But what I'm saying is if it fails this validation for required, what you need to give me back is an error message that says email is required. And that's how you do it. The other thing, validation that we do on email is that email should be email. Which I think I probably should change this here. But let's see if it works. So my validation for email address is what? What is it? What is it? What is it? What is it? Yep. Again, I don't remember everything, so leave me alone. I actually didn't do it there. All right. So no shame in the game. Search email validation. Email usage. Email validation. Usage accepts email addresses. And where are my example? That's showing me MAC address, but I want email. Ooh, examples. Email in the old thing. So this is what you do. MAC address. MAC address doesn't mind. URL. You do the agreed validators URL, and that's how you combine them. I previously knew how to do this off the top of my head. Max length, max length, max length, min length, min length. So it shouldn't care. So let's just try it. Email. And with helpers, so I'll copy this. And yeah, sometimes I get carried away with this. Email isn't there, but I email is here, right? So here I am. It's a comma, please. These are attributes in an object. Email. Token error. Email validation form, import email. I do have it. I do. What are you complaining about? Helpers. You know what? Let's put that there. Put that there for now. Let's see what happens. It's still complaining. Give me a second. This is part of what happens when you're coding, right? Again, remember, I'm trying to show you what really happens. Not a nice polished view, so get bored, hang in there with me. So I'm saying email is required. Max 10 helpers, common, and it's actually dawning on me that I've actually never used the email validation before this, which is pretty interesting. Anyway, password is required, so let's pull password in. Right. Save that. Emails. What's this error saying? A token expected. Somebody tell me what am I missing here? Email, comma. You're an object. Puts you to where you really need to be. Helpers, because required does the same thing. I don't get you. What are you complaining about? You is there. You is there. You is there. And then you is there. What are we complaining about? I'll take you out and see what happens. No, you're supposed to work. You're supposed to work. Purely did. I get you. Yeah, you're supposed to work. Are you? Is it because you're in? We're gonna find out. So it has nothing to do with this, from what I'm seeing here, right? Where's my computer for my validation? I'm returning an object. So the weird part about it is that because I'm returning an object, I have to wrap it in the object as well. So this is one of them that I'm still trying to figure out how to, make sure I understand it fully. Alright, so we found it. No, we found the error. So because I was actually doing a computed, my computed is only just returning an object. I needed to wrap that in, brackets. And then what it's doing is returning all of this back with the validation error. So validation error is now screaming. It's telling me that, hey, you're not using me, but I'm saying, hey, hang on a bit. I still got some work to do. Right? So now that I've matched my, set up my validation rules for my form, let's just go back. All I have is it has to be email is required. And yeah, I didn't have any validation whether it's a real email address that's there. I think there might be a reason for that when I actually get to see what the form looks like again. But right now, let's just go through with this because we required that. Google sign-in is something that is calling out. We don't have Google sign-in just yet. which that's calling about. And then the question is, how do I actually use the view the use form validation portion of it? Now, after I've defined the errors, what I now have to do is pull out from the composable that I had created here, that I pulled in here. I'm going to pull out some stuff from that composable. And then those stuff are going to be leveraged in the forms that I have. So how do you do that? Refactor, use for validation. And remember, if you remember, my use form validation takes two things. The first thing I want is what rules am I validating? And the next thing is, what am I validating the rules against? And my object is going to be supplied credentials. And if you look at my supplied credentials here, the attributes that are listed there are exactly the same as the attributes that I've called out in my validation rules. Now, granted, if I wasn't validating the password, I wouldn't have to put password here. I would just leave it out. But as long as the composable finds an attribute sitting in the rule that matches an attribute from the object that I'm validating, it will apply the relevant rules that I've stated here. So right now I've added the required. Email wasn't a part of what I had previously, but hey, we're refactoring. Who says we can't improve on what is there? So that goes through. Some of the things that I then pull out, I want to be able to access the V. And I think I always run into a problem with this, because if you look in use form validation, what am I sending out? I'm actually sending out $V. So oftentimes I always make a mistake and I probably put $V. So I'm pulling out $V. And the other thing I want to pull out is, if for whatever reason my form is dirty, I want to be able to reset that form. And that's one of the methods that I put in the composable that then gives me the ability to connect with the form, clear all of the fields that I need to clear, and then set focus on where the focus would need to be. And then another question I ask is the form that I'm about to submit, is it clean? And that is clean is being returned when I apply the validation rules here against my document here. Are my attributes holding the values that I expect them to hold? And the other thing I pulled out is get my validation errors, right? And before I did this, man, the amount of code that I had to replicate on my forms to do the validation was crazy. As a matter of fact, let me take you through. So I had to go and find a way to, figure out which field I'm passing, whether the field was dirty or not, and then return the error associated error message. But I imagine having to write this for every single component, every single attribute that needed to be validated. So what I ended up doing was abstracting that away as an actual function, and then just call that function, pass the values to it on the component, and you'll see me doing that. And here is again us resetting the form. So the form would have some sort of reset capabilities, and we'll do that. And this return is exposing these functions and values from the composable so that they can actually be extracted on the actual component itself. So I've pulled these out. All right, so good. Now I need to start using these in my code, and which is where the fun side of things come in. So give me a minute. I'm gonna find one of my examples. All right, so I have the document. I've set the values for that, validation rules. I put it over, and then interestingly enough, I normally have a form fields component that's embedded in, so these wouldn't get used there. So if I go, for example, to my let me find it. Nice. Submit. But all right, here we go. First thing we do, sign in with Google. Wow, that's the crazy part, right? Oh, I don't need these these guys anymore because it's not there. I want to go crazy. So if I'm not signing in with Google and I'm just signing in with regular email and password, this validation would come in handy, right? And validating at that level would mean what? I don't know. What would validating at that level means? Let's clear this out. So my V model remains the same. Credentials, email, right? Error message, I'm not calling a function anymore. So now I can use the get violation errors. And what I'm saying to the get validation errors is, hey, whatever you have for me, whatever I supply to you with a document, in that document, I want you to go validate email. So whatever validation errors you have for email, give it to me and I'll display it for you. And now at the input, I'm just saying, hey, in your validation, whenever you touch, I'm going to grab this thing crazy. And forgive me. Yep, I've just found an error in my code on the other side of things. All right, so V, again, I'm using this. I'll have to go and refactor that as well. So again, the validation component that I've actually exposed, I'm now saying I don't have to go this verbose. I don't have to say supply credentials or anything like that. I just go straight to the attribute that I want. So I'm saying whenever you touch this, whenever that gets blurred, because I'm already tied to the document.email, whatever change happens here is passed into my validation object. And what I'm saying is, if I've made a change, I'm anticipating that Vue is going to ripple this change down to the object. I want to fire my input and I want to validate email because I want to see what value is there and I want to interrogate that value to make sure it is what I expect it to be. So fire all the associated validation rules. That's what I'm saying there. So if we repeat that here, remember my get validation is saying, hey, give me all the validation errors you have, if any, for the password attribute. And by the way, every time I touch this field, I want you to go apply a touch, which is Vue3's way of saying, hey, test, because it's been touched. The password field and make sure it is correct, right? So we've done that. Nothing else needs to be done here. All right, is a reset. Probably need to get that in. Sign in with email is where we need to do this. So now it was saying is invalid. It wasn't a very elegant way of saying it. So what we're now going to say is form clean. Is the form clean? And if it is clean, I want you to proceed. I want you to change load-in. Remember, we're not using this anymore. Load-in.value to true. And this load-in ref is actually going to be used to trigger something in the UI to show the user that there's something happening. I am going to fire my email sign-in function. Or if an error occurs, I'm going to call my handle error function as well. And now it's screaming about email sign-in. It is not defined. Why is email sign-in not defined? Was I using it before? Maybe not. Maybe this was something that was called out in my methods. There it is. So now the unavoidable has happened. Remember, Vue2 to Vue3, Vuex to Pinya, which is here we are. This is our Vuex calling where we do the map actions, and that's not firing there. So what we're gonna do is then use now. I'm gonna bring in my Vue3 reference to that. So if we go back, all of the, let's collapse, all of the folders that we have here are composables. If you notice, there's nothing here for my store. So let's create a stores. This is where all my opinion stores will go. And in my other form, again, a lot of what I do is the same old coming back. I have an authentication store, which is already wired and everything. So I'm going to grab my authentication store, put it here. So I now have authentication stored. See, it's defined in store opinion. Everything is already wired. So we're good. My authentication store is there. I also have something that will come up later is a modules folder that is here, but we don't need it just yet. So let's focus on the how do we leverage the authentication store. So going back to the top, setup script. One of the things I have to now do is call in my authentication store. So it's a composable. That's pretty much what it is. It was written as a composable opinion stores. So here it is. I'm bringing in my authentication store, so it is in, so I can use it. And then the other thing I need to do now is call out some of the functions, the actions that were created on that store. So I still have getters, I still have actions, mutations. I don't have to do mutations anymore as we did with Vue3, where we would have to dispatch to get it mutated because you're not supposed to touch the state directly. Pinia is like touch the state whatever you want, however you want. I'll keep track of it. And so what I'm gonna pull in now is pull in my actions from that component. So in my present setup, what I normally do is I come in and I call out all of my Pinia stuff, right? And what I'm gonna do now is import use authentication store. Yeah, from. Let's tell them where it's at. Stores is where I had it, and it's called authentication store. Let's save that. And I pull it in. So these are my Pinia stuff. I should probably put all my Pinia stuff together. Yep. And then the other thing that is going to be interesting is if I pull in values like my getters, I am going to absolutely need store to ref from Pinia. And the other thing I need, so I've imported this, I've imported the store to ref, and now I need my action. So I create the store. So authentication store is there, and it's just calling the use authentication store. This is where I probably get to pass any values to it if I want. And then constant, this is me pulling out all of the functions here that I was actually previously using. So my Google sign in, my email sign in. Let's try. So let's close that. Let's close that. I don't need you, nor do I need you. All right. So what am I getting here? I'm getting all of this from the authentication store that I created, and I'm extracting it out. So I need my Google sign in. And just for the fun of it, let me just see what's in that, because I think I renamed that email sign in to something a little bit more intuitive, I believe. Oh, that's interesting. I don't even do the password anymore. That is interesting. Okay. So let's do just that. I don't even do that anymore. I'm just remembering. That's funny, isn't it? You like that? So Google sign in is what we have. If I save that and I go back to my chore banks, I'm still seeing some error. All right, let's figure out what the errors are. ID email. La, 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 da, 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 use reactive. I pull in. Yeah, actually, in my newer projects, email sign-in isn't something I even do anymore. And this is actually renamed to next route because there is a next in the guard, which is a function that you get from the route view router. So I've actually renamed this to next route. So this is next route right here. This redirect URL, I don't think I have it anymore. Current route, where do I get current route from? So here's another interesting thing. So if you recall, when we pulled in the router, there was also a use route, and I declared a router here. And one of the things I did in my new project, which I need to remember, I now have a current route, and this next route function was actually refactored to look like this. So I get the current route from the route, because this is what this is telling me. This is baked in, use route. So whatever is in my route, my URL here, I have full access to it. So what I'm saying here in next route is whatever my next route is, if I have any params, and if that param turns out to be something like redirect URL, what I want to do is send the user to what that redirect is. Otherwise, just send him to the home page. So why is this done? Sometimes when the user is logged in, and if that session times out, so their token is no longer valid, it's expired, you want to force them to go back and sign in, but you also want to help them out a little bit by putting them back to the same page that they were on prior to getting that session timeout, and forcing a re-log in. So when that happens, my route guard normally figures out that, hey, your session is expired, grabs the URL that you were trying to go to, and then redirect you to the login page with the redirect URL to say, hey, log in, check if this person is really authorized to get to this page, and if they are, you can send them to this page, right? So this is what we're actually doing right here. So we go in, sign in with Google. Sign in with Google is the only thing that we're going to be using then. So let's save this. It's taken us a long time to get this bad boy up and running. So now here are my error messages. So at my login view 79 doesn't like what's at line 17 and 9. vtext field, ID, email, blah 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 blah, email address, blah blah blah, someone explain, place so someone. I technically don't need this anymore. I technically don't need this anymore. Oh, my bad. This thing went ahead and it did one for me, so I didn't need it here. Just because I used it. So let me do this then. I'm gonna help myself out here. Yeah, the life of a programmer isn't that glamorous, man. When you get really good at it, probably, but it isn't that glamorous. And as it turns out, right now I don't need a store to ref because I'm not using it. So let's save that again. Woo! Now we're getting down to the meat of the matter. At composable use form. My at needs this. Save. At module reload. All right. So now we got it. So now it's complaining about a object that we don't have on the form, which is an OR divider. Ugh. And so this was a component that I had created on another project that clearly we don't need it anymore. So you know when you have those, the login screen and there is a email, this, and there's a or. So I actually had created a component that did that little thing, that little or. It's just a displayable component, dumb component, nothing wrong with it. So it's here somewhere. And it actually tells you source components UI login view line 12 Google sign in, or here we are. So let's rid of it. I actually had it here. It was looking for it here. It's not, so we don't need it. Save. Login view. Not complaining about anything. The hot module reload should have worked. Fetch dynamically. Router. View router. This is a little bit more so I can see some more of this. All right. So now it's complaining about some of my components that I need to get in. So we're almost there. All right. So one of the other things that I've done in my newer projects, I am my worst nightmare. From project to project, I come up with some grand ideas. My God, this is definitely how I should be doing things going forward. And one of those things that I did come up with is I now need components that are app level components. I need them. Is my Google? Why aren't you here? Oh, I don't need you there. I need you here. Oh, so there we go. So we have that spread out. So app tier components, I need them in a subfolder under components called app. And then as we go through different components that are not necessarily at the application level, but more of a particular domain level within the application, I put them in subfolders under those domains. So in the case of the app toolbar, which we use here, that was one of the components that I've actually kind of rewritten a bit. So I'm gonna, just in the interest of, because this is going on for a long time, it's now called an app form toolbar. So I'm gonna bring that over. All right, and most of what I've done is still the same. The exception that this is now gonna be app form toolbar. Right, it's no longer green. But if I go here, I am now importing this from the app, and it's gonna be app form dot toolbar, and I keep the camel case, and then that should solve that mystery, which I think it should. Let's do a reload. And now another mystery comes up. So here we are. Avatar, I don't like your icons. This is what this is saying. Oh, by the way, warning, unhandled exception, execution of scheduler flush. Cool. This is where I wanted a Google button. Require is not defined. Google button. Open the eyes of the Lord. I wanna choo 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 choo. Components. Google. My Google button. Require. And why aren't you working, sir? It says required. Doesn't work anymore. So did I not refactor you? So let's back out a bit. That Google button came from there. I want my new Google button. Versioning is also something that I need to get a handle on. Alright, so this is the new version of it. Again, if you recall from what I was doing a little bit earlier, now the require, I don't have access to require because I'm using the Vite. And a lot of things has actually changed from what we were using in Webpack as well. So now I have to do explicit imports. I'm pulling in this object into a variable here, and then what I use is a computed value then to expose it to the DOM, in the making sure that view actually has full visibility to it. So if I save this and do this, there we go. Holy smoke! Yes, this is what we've been trying to load all this time, for this entire session that we've been recording. And so there is a login screen. It's up there. There's the app logo that we were messing around with when we did, um, here, my app on the homepage, rather. Oh, login, rather. Yeah, here it is. Application logo. So again, it's a login view. I've pulled this in, and I've just kept it so far to be the Vue3 logo that is out there. And then as we bring the application closer to prod, we'll change that out with a logo that we have for, the Chore Bank application. Here's the two email fields that we had where we had the validation. In previous versions of the app, we were actually doing, email login, which I think I might keep in, because now that we're extending it to other families, they all don't necessarily have Google sign in. So what we're going to do is make the Google sign in the predominant sign in method here. And if you have it, you have it. If you don't, you use other email. And that's where the or button came in for us as well. If I go over to my app, I'm just trying to look in the newer code if that or, divider transitioned over, and it did. But under my components, shrink everything. Under my components, just I have an app tier. I also had a UI. So this is the general, where the general items would be, and that or component would be one such general component. So if I did that, forget about you, and I do or divider component UI or divider, it is there. And it also means that just where I had my Google button, I can now come back and do, and that should break it again. This bad boy is actually looking for SAS. Not up, top. I don't actually need SAS because this has nothing to do with SAS there. Let's keep it at CSS and it's scoped. And there you go. If I do a refresh, there we go. So this is the OR divider that we were talking about there. Login view, login works. My click.native has been deprecated. So I need to go and figure out what is the replacement for the .native. And that's something we'll probably do before we close out. But just to give it a whirl, let's just see if it actually works. Click on the Google sign in. It loads. These are my different things that I have signed in with. I'm gonna go hit this one to sign in with it. I'm already registered on that Firebase projects. So here I am. I'm actually successfully logged in into my home view, and this is the only thing that my home view is showing. For real. So if I hit save, hot model reload will show that, and I'm in. So from a Firebase perspective, I am actually logged in. There's a couple of warning here about cross-origin open up policies. These are stuff I have to fix as we go through, because a lot of the policies from internet logins and they're constant. Well, I would say constantly change. There's some changes that we have to make sure that we are accounted for to remain in compliance. But as you can see, that was a process of refactoring a login page. A lot of it was my doing in terms of the style that I was actually using to refactor stuff. But as you can see, that was a login page. We were able to get in, and then the .native, something I'm actually going to take offline for you to see. One of the things I can do before we go off is in the home view, let's just put a button here. So Vue3, love Vue3. My color, if you remember when I started, we were dealing with some of the catchphrases we had, like the primary in the Vue3 theme, the light theme that I have on this. So I'm going to put this as logout. Save that. So there's a logout button there. So what I want to do is when I hit this, I want to return to my login screen. So just before we go out, let's just make sure we have that done. And in order to do that, one of the things we are doing is from the app, we are going to pull in, we still need the, we need to import my authentication store, right? So we got our authentication store there. And then with the authentication store in, one of the things that we need to pull out is, if you remember, we pull that in the Pinia store. We now need to declare, and then one of the other things we need to do is get the actual function that will, from Firebase, that will do the sign out. And then from the Firebase library that I've actually created, the Firebase store, the Pinia store that I've actually used to extract a lot of the Firebase functions, I have a sign out function, and it's just a matter of wiring this sign out function to this button and then doing some rerouting after we do that, right? So there's a in what I've done in other project is to handle the attempt to sign out by the user. If you recall my router here, I need to pull in my router components, my my router composables here from Vue router. I'm gonna pull them in, and my router, I now have to declare a router, which I'm gonna do right here. So I now have access to that router, and I'm saying, hey, when I sign out, I want you to push me back to the login page, or I want you to send me to an error path. Let's see how that works. There's a router view here only because I needed the router view for display. There's no display going on in this one, so it's really just us trying to get to sign out. Handle sign out is now telling me, hey buddy, I don't know where this is. I'm gonna use my variable there, keep that in good faith. So my logout button is there. We are good. Handle sign out is the only other thing I need to do, and handle sign out calls my sign out function. So on this button, I will put a @click equal handle user sign out, and with any luck, if I click on this right now, I'm signed out. Right? And you can tell that I'm signed out because if I attempt to go back to login, or my home page rather, my router guard from my routes, router guard kicks in and it says, hey, is the user logged in, which is calling from Firebase, my Firebase current user. If it's not, like I can't find a current user object, then I'm not logged in. The home page is not public, so there's no meta attribute with a sub attribute of public on it. So as far as the app is concerned, the guard is concerned, I need to go back to the login screen and get authenticated before I can hit it. So it's been a long session. That's the login view. So I'm gonna continue to record sessions like this as we refactor the chore bank rather app that I have for the kids. And through that journey, remember, no expert here, just documenting what that journey looks like for me to move from Vue2 to Vue3. And I'm actually biting off a lot more than you would probably do in normal prod, because not only am I moving from Vue2 to Vue3, I'm changing over from Vuex to Pinia. And I'm also, because when you go to Vue3, Vue2, while Vuetify 2 continues to work with Vue3, there's a lot of new built-in capabilities with Vue2 3 that works nicely with Vue3. So I'm doing that triple hop in one refactoring. So here's the page. I guess by the time we have our next episode, I'll be I would have actually put in the email signing portion of it, make sure that the alert doesn't show consistently all the time. And then we'll be able to go in and log in from here. So until the next time, yo, this is Marlon bugging out. Peace.